Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the postgraduate information session here at UTS, Industry Panel Information Session for Journalism and Sports Media. My name is Professor Saba Bibawi. I'm Head of Discipline for Journalism and Writing, and I'm joined tonight with Alex Brown, Head of Discipline of Sports Media, Head of Communications and Cricket Australia. And also we have with us the alumni panel, Wendy John, Michaela Morgan, and Elise Mirowski. So I would like to start by a welcome to country. And I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose ancestral lands our city campus now stands. I would also like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for this land. Now, before we start, just a few housekeeping things to keep in mind. We will be recording this session. So I just wanted you to know that. This recording is purely for a resource for the future. So by taking part in this session, I just hope that you understand and acknowledge that your information will be used for those purposes. To be involved and be recorded as part of this webinar, just contact UTS at the fast.marketing@uts.edu.au instead to discuss any questions that you might have. So let's start today. I'm excited to see you all here, and clearly you are interested to know more about us. So what we'll do is the plan for today is that we'll talk through giving you background about the courses we offer and how they're structured and why we do them. We then will move on to the panel, where we will have a discussion about all things journalism in the current environment, and then we'll pass it on to you for Q&A. So if you don't mind, if you can just keep the questions, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom, and hold off until we get to the Q&A, if you don't mind. I do want to let you know that we will also be keeping an eye on that throughout. So the first thing I'd like to talk to you is about the Master of Advanced Journalism. Now this course is ideally suited for students who want to delve a little bit more into the area, and they have the option of taking more electives, including advanced journalism electives. So it might suit those who want to specialize at the stage of their career, or they might be completely new to journalism and want to expand their journalism studies, such that they can specialize in, for example, sports reportage, as we'll talk about later. Or they might want to have an interest in data journalism, where electives from other faculties are available in relation to that. We also have our digital journalism focus, where we offer a variety of practical and theoretical subjects across many disciplines, including digital and social media. Now, one of the things that I would like to highlight, and I've worked across a lot of journalism schools in Australia and overseas, is we do more than just teach students how to do journalism. Our focus is that we want students to be thinking as journalists. We want students to be journalism critical thinkers. So our courses have a very nice balance of both practical skills, but also theoretical concepts. We want you to sit at a table with other journalists and be able to talk the talk and understand the issues that surround the industry of journalism. So, but not only that, not only do we want you to be upskilled to the latest digital technologies in journalism, and not only do we want you to think as journalists, but we want you to think about changing journalism. And adapting, not just adapting to it, but be the drivers of change for the future. And I firmly believe in that. And I hope that through our alumni, you can see how the way they perceive journalism, think about journalism, is different when they came in. So this is a really vital area that we focus on. Moving on, I would like to also talk about the advanced journalism structure. So the Master of Advanced Journalism is a 1.5 years, it's a full-time course, which can be done also part-time. You can take part-time students, depending on the subject, as it says here, it could take up to 2 to 5 years. Now, the course consists of 6 core subjects, which you can find online or on the handbook, and these are why they're important foundation for the course. So the core subjects are advanced journalism, media law and accountability, journalism studies, digital journalism and beyond, data and computational journalism, and we wrap it up with the journalism major project at the end as a capstone. You also get to choose electives, and this is where your specialization comes in. This is where, if you want to be specialized in a particular area or build your portfolio in a particular area, you can select the electives accordingly. So you can choose 3 elective subjects, and you can explore your interests, and there are a wide array of areas, including creative nonfiction, investigative journalism, international and transnational journalism, and digital sports journalism, just to name a few. So depending on where you want to be or where you see yourself or how you would like your portfolio to look, then you can select those electives. And it's really important that you have that flexibility. So a typical course structure for full-time students would usually include 2 core subjects and 1 elective per semester. So that's the load that you're looking into. We also have the graduate diploma in advanced journalism. In the graduate, the core subjects you would take to study are advanced journalism, media law and accountability, journalism studies, and digital journalism and beyond. And these are combined with a very strong baseline for knowledge from which to continue building. So advanced journalism and journalism studies expose you to the crossover between practice and theory with an overlay of the pure practice incorporating latest technologies in digital journalism and beyond. So one of the ways you can do it is you can start with a graduate diploma in advanced journalism, just to dip your toe and just get a feel of it. And then you can always go on to the Masters of Advanced Journalism. Or arguably, you can also go for the Masters of Advanced Journalism. And then if you want to cut it short, then you can always fall back onto a graduate diploma in advanced journalism, depending on the number of subjects that you have accumulated and passed. We'll go on to talk about the graduate diploma in sports media, and I might hand over here to Alex Brown, who will introduce himself and talk about that. Alex, are you around to talk about this?
I am. How are you? Good to see you, Saba.
Good to see you. Thanks, Alex, for joining us.
Not a problem. So guys, just a quick run through with digital sports journalism. So I think this is the 3rd year I've been doing this. I also work as head of communications at Cricket Australia as a full-time job, but the subject is very deliberately practical, and every week we are either in conversation with, you know, one of the real sort of thought leaders or leaders of industry in the sports media space, or we're offsite at, you know, for example, so this semester, for example, we've done an offsite at Fox Sports, and where we've watched an evening of programming being created live in the studio, on the set, in the control room, and then speaking to all the people who are creating that live television after it's finished. We've been to the Sydney Cricket Ground to have a look at how a stadium operates in a live environment from a media perspective, and also in the MX lab to record at UTS to record podcasts. So we try to cover all the disciplines and all the platforms, so that, you know, you're assessed on video, written and audio, which, you know, covers a fair few of the platforms that you know, the digital sports media space covers. and we try to cover some of the issues confronting it. And again, so last night, for example, we were in discussion with Finn Bradshaw, who is the head of digital and on the executive of the International Cricket Council in Dubai. So he joined us as Eid. It was very good of him to join us to talk with the students about, the digital sports media space, changes in the industry. And there was some real, I learned quite a bit from our discussions with some of these topic area experts, talking about, his advice for those entering the industry. So it's a very, very deliberately a hands-on practical course where you spend genuine face time with leaders in the industry who will listen to you, take your questions. And I guess the flow-on effect from that is that we've got a really good, I would say, record of students picking up employment. So this semester alone, I think there's 3 students who've already picked up paid shifts at Fox Sports. So quite often they'll call and be looking for recommendations. So we've got 3 this semester. A couple of semesters ago, I think we had something like 7. I'm not saying that's always the case, but we've got a pretty solid track record of. I think the industry views this subject favourably, and that the students who excel in it tend to have a pretty decent track record of picking up genuine work in the industry. So Saba, that's the snapshot.
Thanks. That's really great, Alex. I appreciate it. So that just kind of gives everybody an idea of what the course looks like and the kind of energy that's going on there. We'll hear more from Alex shortly. But Alex, actually very shortly, if you want to pitch into any of this, then please do. But the idea of why studying journalism and sports media at UTS, I can speak from the journalism aspect. As it says here, we've got the industry facilities. You can have exclusive facilities to the Sydney Cricket Ground Trust or Moore Park facilities. Did you want to talk about that, Alex, at all?
Yeah. Again, this, we spent the evening at Fox Sports is always, it always goes down well with the students, because you get to, we can talk about the theory and have all the discussions with, executive producers and CEOs, but the evening at Fox Sports every semester is the opportunity to see it being created live, warts and all. It's actually some of the better nights is when live goes wrong, because you actually get to see firsthand from a real industry experience as to how they get through that. So this year we went to the studios in Artarmon. They were recording a television program called NRL 360 that night, and we've got quite a big intake this year. I think we've got 21 students, 3 of which are overseas, who we showed virtually this evening. But we had to split into 2 groups. One sat in the control room for the first segment of the show until the first ad break to see the line producers, the sound technician, everybody there behind the scenes pulling this show together in real time as it went live to air. And the other half were on the set with the talent and the cameras. And then we switched in the ad break. And then afterwards, the talent, the hosts, the EPs all sat down with us, talked about what was made, talked about the roles and responsibilities and how live TV came to life. So that's always a great evening, because it's watching sports journalism getting made in real time, going live to a couple of 100,000 people. The Sydney Cricket Ground is another great one. There's the UTS has a great partnership with the SCG and has for many years, where we go onto the ground and they explain to us. It's funny because you look at a stadium and you think it's grass and seats, but it's actually a mini city in terms of its connectivity. It's the Sydney Cricket Ground last summer was hosting a test match between Australia and India, and the viewing audience, the global viewing audience, was live in the hundreds of millions. And so you've got this venue sitting in Moore Park with this unbelievable ability in terms of its connectivity and its ability to send messages out to the world, which is as sophisticated as kind of anything you'll see in the world, genuinely. So you see it from an operational level, from a, sort of the dressing rooms where the athletes are, where the media are, where the commentators are, and you really get that feeling for what it is to be producing journalism in this live environment. And it's quite unique to sport. You can't really replicate that in all avenues of journalism. And then probably, the third, I guess, offsite that we have is that one where we go to the MX lab in the Bon Marsh building at UTS, and it's terrific because that is, as a facility, the equivalent of pretty much any radio station you'll go to around the country, and the students sit there with their equipment, having, in groups of 3 to 4, having worked through the script and the roles that everybody will play to record a podcast, which I then assess. So again, you get this terrific, very practical, very hands-on experience as to what it is to see it made live, to create it yourself, and to sort of see it in that live environment, which again is quite unique to sport. So I don't know of any other subject at least in this city that offers that kind of, again, that hands-on experience, but also that window into the hirers and the decision makers and the thought leaders in the industry, and it's every week. So it's pretty good. It's pretty special like that.
Absolutely, and I do suggest that come down and see our facilities and studios and come and talk to us. Definitely, it doesn't have to be confined within Zoom to see a little bit more of what we're talking about, but also having our campus in the city really helps, being so close to the ABC across the street basically, and very close, central to everything else. So thanks for that, Alex. I'll move on to talk about Central News, which is our student publication. Now, Central News has, I actually asked, we have a new editor, Martin Newman, to join us, but he's actually teaching as we speak. But we're very excited about Central News because it's been developing beautifully. It has actually won awards 2 years in a row, the Aussies Award for the best student publication. And this is a very competitive space. The idea of Central News is this space where students can work. We have a rotating mentorship program. We've got an audio team, we've got a social media team, we've got a video team. We focus a lot on multimedia. I strongly encourage you to go and have a look at it at the site. But more importantly, it just brings into practice everything that you work on for students who are undergrad and postgrad. And every morning from 9 to 10:30, we have a pitching meeting where you can come and pitch your ideas, and we work with you. I'm going to just call on Wendy, just off guard if she's here. Wendy John, who has actually had a lot to do with Central News. So Wendy, did you want to talk a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Saba.
Because you were
I think Central News is one of the one of the best experiences in terms of just you do your assignments and you learn so much from your assignments. And I was able to build a really good level of capability across a whole range of writing, audio, video, socials. But it's only when you do it again and again and again and again that you get good and that you get faster. And Central News enabled me to get better and faster. So it was such a rich part of my university experience. I think, yeah, hands down. And I was lucky to be a part of the student editor team, and still now as a mentor for some students. So it's part of that real newsroom experience, but you can do it at your own pace. And it's really supportive. Like some students want to I don't have a story, but I want to do something for Central News. And you can work with the story editor, and they really support you to refine your ideas and come up with a pitch. And then it's they've got you back the whole time.
Thanks, Wendy. That's great. And absolutely, the Martin has been sending out, for example, daily on what the latest news is, and calls anyone who wants to come do a story on it. So it's a really good way. I mean, now they've gone out last night and covering the budget. So there's constantly things happening, and there's a vibe, and as you will see, and Wendy can also talk about that, is that there are a variety of topics that we welcome. We do want to also not be restrained by certain editorial agendas. This is a platform and it's a space for learning, and that's why it's really important. So thanks, Wendy, for that. Really appreciate it. And we'll move on to talk about the Foreign Correspondent Study Tour, which we also offer. Wendy was part of that. But I'll also call on Michaela and Alicia to talk a little bit about this. But just to give you a background, right now the borders are closed, so this is on hold. But we get funding from the Department of Foreign Affairs to run this study tour, which we take students internationally for 2 weeks. We've gone to countries such as the Philippines, Jordan, Tunisia, India, and Thailand. And these study tours, they are funded, so students usually just pay their ticket. But we have an exclusive partnership with SBS Online, and so students have been publishing as they go. One of the things that is important for us in this degree is, in addition to the things that we spoke about at the beginning, which is the need to have that critical thinking with high-level skills, is also to have an international outlook. We want you to understand different journalism cultures and different ways that journalism has been done. Michaela and Elise have joined us. Michaela actually came to, and Elise are both unique to the Foreign Correspondent Study Tour. Wendy joined too, but Michaela came at one study tour and then joined me in Tunisia as a study tour leader. So she was a student and then led it. And Elise is, I think, the only student who joined us for 2 study tours, which was to Jordan and India. So I might start with Michaela, and then Elise, if you want to say a few words on that.
Yeah, I would just say thank you to the study tour. I think it kickstarted my whole career, to be honest. Before I signed up, I didn't even know if I'd get accepted. And then once we hit the ground, we started in Amman. I filed a story. The next day we're in the Dead Sea and Saba was editing it for me. Then we sent it off to SBS, and then that evening it was live in Australia. And to have that kind of rewarding experience of working so hard, the adrenaline, you don't sleep, you're interviewing people in a country you've never been to before, and then to have it published the next day was absolutely incredible. And then you just get even better with each story, and just gives you that confidence and that skill of digital journalism. And then that's why I've not wanted to leave the project. And so it was equally as rewarding to go to Tunisia and help the students, the master's students who went in 2019.
And thanks, Michaela. Yes, we do 5 stories in 2 weeks. So it's a real foreign correspondent, authentic learning experience. Elise, thanks, Michaela. Elise,
I think probably 2 things in terms of the turnaround of content in that 2 weeks. I'm not sure about the other Michaela and Wendy, but as a reporter in Central Australia, we were talking sort of 8 to 12 stories a week. So I think you really do challenge yourself and you get into that rhythm of producing things quickly. But I think also on another note, I can hand on heart, and Salva knows this, I would not be where I am today were it not for the experience, that those 2 foreign correspondent tours gave me. Even 1 foreign correspondent tour would have been enough. I think in terms of the, not just the experience, but the connections I made, and I think the gravitas that that experience has by placing it on your resume and being able to have those discussions and showing that you have that sense of wanting to challenge yourself, explore new places and cultures, and that you're agile. That's something that, yeah, absolutely would not be where I am today career-wise, were it not for the fact that I did this master's and participated in these 2 foreign correspondent tours.
Thanks, Elise. It's just reminded me of how it was and how we'd work on the buses, make them into newsrooms. So everywhere was a mobile newsroom. But yeah, so that is kind of an example of the internationalization of the program, along with having international guest speakers and also collaborations with other students and journalists. The advanced journalism admission requirements are listed here. I won't go through them simply because they are available online, but just letting you know that applicants need to have completed a UTS recognized bachelor's degree or equivalent or higher qualification, or submitted other evidence of general and professional qualifications that allow them to pursue graduate studies. If you don't have any of that, then applicants can provide a short essay of no more than 1,000 words about key challenges facing journalism in the news industries. So you can read through that. If you've got any questions, let us know today. Just highlighting that for the English proficiency requirement for international students, is an IELTS of 7, so overall. The sports media admissions requirements are also listed here, so quite similar, but with a few variants. So you do need to also include a personal statement of approximately 500 words explaining why you do want to study this course, and a CV which could include details of paid and voluntary work or other experiences that you think are relevant. And for the international IELTS, it's 6.5 overall. So in terms of the application deadlines, we have the international students the 31st of May, 2021. I might just call on James Liu from UTS if you would like to say anything at this point to add.
Hello, everyone. Note this, the application deadlines are pretty clear out there. So domestic students can apply through the UTS online application system. And I just realized that if you're a UTS student and you're trying to apply, you may face issues trying to use your UTS login details. You have to create a new login and profile to be able to apply. That's it.
Thanks, James. In terms of the fees, they are listed here. It is important just to remind you that if you are an Australian citizen or New Zealand special category visa holder or a humanitarian visa permanent resident, you are entitled to fee help for your eligibility, which is mainly a low tax loan from the government, which you pay off, very similar to HECS, once you start working. I must say that's how I paid off my master's at Monash University. So, so that's a really good way of investing in your career, and it's always rewarding when you get to be where you want to be. Or achieve what you want to achieve. So definitely see it as an investment in your career. It certainly was for me. If you are a UTS alumni, then you get 10% of the fees, if I'm correct. So if you have any further questions, please let us know in regards to the fees. I will now move to the second part, which is the panel discussion. So we're just going to have a little bit of a discussion and talk about things in general. So this is when I would kindly ask the panel members to turn on their cameras and their mics. I've got we're going to have a relaxed chat here. So, but before I start, it would be great if the panelists can introduce themselves. You've heard a little bit from everyone, but it'd be good if they can introduce themselves really properly. So, Alex, I might start with you.
Oh, yep. Hi guys. Sorry, I'm just struggling to find the video, but I'll find it. Alex is my name. I've been lecturing the subject for I think almost 3 years now. I started in journalism at the Sydney Morning Herald a long time ago. When was it? 95 in the mailroom, I think it was, and was studying at UTS at the same time. And have since worked overseas in the US in San Francisco for a couple of years at the paper there called the San Francisco Examiner. I was with The Guardian in the UK. I was with ESPN out of India and the UK. A little paper called the St. Croix in the Caribbean, but that was probably more life experience than journalism experience. But most of the time, most of my career has been either the Sydney Morning Herald and a stint at News Corp and through Fox Sports. In the last 2 years, I've gone into communication with Cricket Australia, and which is interesting, from a geopolitical standpoint as much as anything. And that's basically me, essentially, in terms of a resume. So.
Thanks, Alex. I'll move on to Elise.
Yep. So I have a background in anthropology and sociology from UCITS. I spent my entire 20s not knowing what I wanted to do and not knowing sort of where I belonged in the world, I suppose. And then I had done a bit of social media for a psychologist in Surrey Hills and knew that I was good at writing. And I was on Facebook one day and got served an ad for the master's degree at UTS. So I enrolled and I started the degree. And one of my fellow students was looking for staff at a kind of a startup at News Corp called News Extend. And so I ended up working with her. We were a 2-person team that looked after over 400 social media accounts at News Corp, and then did the 2 foreign correspondent study tours, finished my master's, and there was a job in Central Australia in a place called Alice Springs that I really wanted. So I ended up getting it after I finished my master's. I was in Alice Springs as the senior reporter and digital editor there for a year, and then COVID happened. I came back to Sydney for a couple of weeks, which turned into a few months, and started working for News Local, managing 3 of their mastheads. And then one of the politicians that I met whilst in Alice Springs, he scouted me for a role as his engagement and communications advisor. So he is a young minister, Aboriginal, he's gay, so he ticks all the right boxes in terms of representation up in the territory. And I look after all of his social media and comms. So I think coming from someone that, didn't know what they wanted to do throughout all their 20s, I'm 34 now, and the master's degree and everything absolutely changed my life. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Elise. That's great. Wendy?
So I've got a background of about 20 years in corporate learning and development. So as a training and development manager, facilitator, and probably about 6-7 years ago, I really wanted to do something different. I wanted to have a more creative, a deeper, richer, more creative life. And so I started looking at different options Was it filmmaking? Was it journalism? And I remember going to a face-to-face session exactly like this back, those years ago, and hearing about the program. And I started the masters because I chose this masters because it was so practical. I thought I'm going to be able to get a lot of really hands-on experience working with audio recorders, working with video, working with editing software. I'm going to learn how to write. I'm going to learn how to create multi-platform content. I guess what I didn't expect, and I've just been chipping away at this. I started when I felt pregnant. I started when I was pregnant. I took 18 months off, and I've just been chipping away. Some years I've only done one subject. Some years I've done two. I've been chipping away at the masters. I finally finished the end of last year, and what I didn't expect was I've got an undergrad in international business relations, and I've studied some international relations postgrad as well, a couple of subjects, but I actually feel educated in a way that I never had before. And a part of that is a statement of the times and the stories that, the stories that I got to cover through Central News, the Black Lives Matter movement, and then covering coronial inquiries for Tani Chatfield, Indigenous man who died in custody, following candlelit vigils, being challenged by younger students who are doing their undergrads, working with them through Central News, hearing what their perspectives are. So I'm 49, I'm from a generation that has a certain viewpoint or viewpoints relative to age. And so to be able to engage with different people who were sometimes a lot younger than me was very useful in expanding my thinking, in challenging my thinking, and enabling me to go deeper into my journalism studies beyond just, oh, I'm great at making video now. So it's been amazing. And that is directly as a result of being involved in Central News. That wouldn't necessarily, I don't think I would have had so much exposure to so many different ways of thinking if I hadn't have been engaged with that. So that's one of the things I really love about UTS is just how many opportunities there are outside of the actual coursework. And the coursework's great. I mean, the Foreign Correspondent study tour is a subject, it's like, how good is that? So now I finished last year. I did the Sydney Morning Herald internship over the summer. It's a tough time to be looking for work as a journalist, but I've been doing a bit of freelance work throughout because I've been taking my time doing the masters, which has been the best thing ever. I've been also doing a bit of freelance work during that time, and I had never listened to a podcast. I think I'd listened to a TED talk on podcast previously, and then I had to make a podcast at uni, and then went to a conference and submitted the podcast for a podcasting competition with Nova Entertainment, and it won the competition. And now I'm doing a podcast for Nova, and then on the back of that I got some freelance work creating a podcast for Australian Society of Authors. And since then, at the moment I'm doing a bit of freelance work creating, collaborating on a podcast for the Sydney Institute of Marine Science, for the Manly Seaweed Forest Festival. So even though I'm not in full-time work at the moment, I'm looking for it, but there's work coming in as a direct result of being pushed to do things that I didn't know anything about when I was at university.
Thanks, Wendy. Moving on to Michaela, who's also employed as a foreign correspondent editor, leader and tutor at UTS. So she's become one of us. So if you can introduce yourself, Michaela.
Yeah, for sure. So I know I mentioned the Foreign Correspondent Study Tour, but what I didn't say was that partnership with SBS directly led me to employment. So on the strength of the work that I did in Jordan, the editors back in Sydney said, oh, hey, you available for 2 weeks to do some work? And I said, yes. And then as usual, that the weeks turned into months, turned into years. So that directly as a result of that UTS project, I had my first journalism job, and it was at SBS, and I loved it. So I was there for a while at SBS Life and Food, writing feature stories, and also just learning how to be a digital journalist, use social media, get a story up really quickly. But then I saw another great opportunity through UTS, which was to study in Denmark. And working full time, I saw it as an opportunity to finish the rest of my degree in one go in 6 months. So I ended up studying at the Danish School of Media and Journalism, which I don't want to keep throwing overseas opportunities around because I know it's tricky right now and we can't be there. But it was an amazing opportunity given to me from UTS, where I now have a whole network of journalists from Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, and we all studied together there in Denmark for 6 months. Then when I came back, I started doing some work for Channel 10 and 10 Daily, and stayed there for 2 years until COVID unfortunately hit, and it was shut down by Channel 10. But that was another really great young newsroom. I started just a few months after they launched. There was also a lot of other great UTS undergrad students working there. And then since then I've been working kind of freelance, which has been, yeah, also really interesting. But yeah, a lot that I owe to the UTS master's degree.
Thanks, Michaela. That's great. I might just, I've got a question for each of you. But feel free if anyone wants to jump in and comment. So Alex, I'll start with you, and I'm really interested to know, I would like to know what drew you to the career in sports journalism?
It's a good question. It was something I felt, sort of through my latter years of high school I wanted to do. What I didn't know was how, and what I figured was, the best way was just to get a foot in the door. And it's funny because I still think that advice is really sound. It's certainly when we have all the bosses through talking to the students, and it's always the first question that gets asked is like, how do I get a foot, how do I get into the industry? And it's just like the very fact that you're here talking to me, not me, but the people who are hiring now, puts you ahead of the 200 resumes I've got on my desk. To me, that was getting a job in the mailroom, and I was doing an undergrad at UTS. But I just genuinely couldn't think of a better career, which was, the deadline pressure, writing. That's now sort of expanded, obviously, across many more platforms. The modern sports journalist. But I was very lucky. I got to cover the Sydney, Athens, Beijing Olympics. I've been to Super Bowls, World Cups. Baseball World Series, travel to India, the Caribbean, South Africa, Zimbabwe, with cricket. So you sort of, on the one hand, you obviously most people who go into sports journalism sort of like sport, but you get to, if you like writing and storytelling, it's a really rich environment. And it's just, kind of the opiate of the masses, right? Like it's a universal language in a lot of ways. Like you can go to a country you've never been to before. You might struggle with customs and cultures and language, but it's sort of like the one thing that everybody kind of understands. And, the places that this career has taken me, if you'd asked me like at the age of 18, coming out of high school and joining the mailroom of the Sydney Morning Herald, I wouldn't have believed it, but it is. And it's sort of, it's something I'm quite conscious of in the class, every semester, is that, like, if you read the trade press, there's a lot of doom and gloom and, media's in trouble. Look, I can't speak for every sector of journalism, but certainly in the sports space, there's more jobs now than at any other point in my career. Now, they're not like they were. So I'm 44. So, when I was coming through in the mid-90s, you kind of got to choose between a newspaper, a radio station, or a TV station, and maybe a wire service, and that was kind of it. There was nowhere else to go. Whereas now, like in the sports space, it's telcos, it's sporting codes, it's the clubs, in addition to the mainstream media, and a really energizing and enterprising independent media collective that's sort of coming to life in that space. So it's dynamic. It's terrifying at times because the rate of change. It was funny. I was lecturing a very similar subject for NYU a couple of semesters ago, and they had this textbook, like, terrific textbook. Like, it had only been printed about 18 months before, and I was reading it before the semester started. And I called the professor in New York and I said, mate, like 2/3 of this is redundant. Like, and it's got nothing to do with the book itself. The book was terrific. but that was the rate of change of the industry that, you know, which again comes back to the practical nature of this subject, which is, you know, it's very much about getting in front of, listening to, asking questions of the people who are at the forefront of that change in the industry, who are making those decisions, and then putting it into play yourself, making it, creating it yourself across multiple platforms, seeing it being made in real time. So yeah, I don't know, like I still think it's the best job in the world. So
great to have a job you love. Thanks, Alex. Wendy, I might ask you a question about, I mean, you spoke about your experience at UTS, but we have right now joining us today many people who are interested in our courses, and that's why they're here, and might perceive this as an opportunity for a career change. So what advice do you have for our lovely attendees who are thinking about starting this course? Like just a few points or one piece of it.
In terms of a career change, I think the course really has equipped me with the skills that I need. Not just the course, but being a journalism student at UTS and all that offers has really equipped me. But I would have to say, if I had to have done it full time in 18 months, I mean, that wasn't physically possible for me, sort of having a baby and family and all that sort of thing at the time. So if I'd had to do it in 18 months, I honestly don't think I would have enjoyed it anywhere near as much. It wouldn't have enabled me, because I really took it slowly. I think that's my advice, taking it slowly is fine. I was able to do freelance learning and development and earn money and support myself throughout these years, as well as learning these new skills and starting to pick up freelance journalism. So at the moment, I've got side-by-side careers going, and then hopefully the journalism will start to take over more and more, and the freelance learning and development will peter off. So slowing it down has been such a blessing. Yeah, and I've just loved it. I've been able to achieve more because I've been able to just focus on one subject, one topic at a time, and really dive deep.
And over a longer period of time.
And over a longer period of time, just being patient and allowing myself to do that, taking the pressure off, and it's allowed me. I've been happier. I've had a happier life because of it, and yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Wendy. That's sound advice. Now I'm conscious of time because I do think we need to allow for Q&A. So I'm waiting for some kind of indication as to how we're going. But I will squeeze in two quick questions, one for Elise and one for Michaela. So we'll make it snappy. Elise, you've been working during COVID times and journalism's changed a little bit. Do you think there were any skills that you picked up at UTS journalism that allowed you to function in a COVID world of journalism that we could not have predicted or even prepared anyone for?
I think in terms of, for me, I'm really big on the digital side of things. So knowing that I had, that insight into how the digital platforms operated, I'd made really fantastic networks as well at UTS. And so that also allowed me to, when the paper I was working for shut in Central Australia, it allowed me to go back to Sydney and then leverage those networks and get back in the game. I mean, in terms of a COVID world, being able to work remotely and work independently, and being proactive and knowing that you really have, I mean, when Wendy said before that you feel like you've received an education, I absolutely agree. It's something that I feel like it took me 3 years to do my master's, and I was absolutely empowered. Not just through the coursework, but I think what set UTS apart was the care factor of the lecturers. So I think, yeah, there was definitely a myriad of things that that gave me that sense of resilience to be able to work remotely, work independently, know which questions to ask. I think having really good critical thinking skills and good problem solving skills, and knowing that, again, with the foreign correspondent tours, that if something goes wrong, and in my job now when I'm out bush, or when I covered a shooting in a remote community, or the closure of the Uluru Climb closure, you're in places with no internet and no one that you can get guidance from, and so being able to really back yourself, and really something I'll take away from UTS.
Thanks, Elise.
Or something I did take away from UTS.
That's lovely, thank you. We've got questions coming into the Q&A box, so hopefully we'll answer them as we go, because James Liu is there taking care of it. But if there are any questions for the panel, then let us know. And meanwhile, I'll move on to my last question to Michaela. Michaela, you spoke about working for SBS Online, and you've been on other online news platforms working. UTS journalism, there's a huge focus on digital skills and digital media, and we are aware of the need of the future focus of the industry. So how does this prepare students for when they start applying the skills they have learned in their workplace? If you can tell us a little bit.
I think when you're doing these projects, like if you're working on Central News or Foreign Correspondent Study Tour, you're learning to do the things that I think when I did my undergraduate, we weren't learning as much back then. We're learning how to pitch, learning how to put a story together, and learning how to put a social sell together so people actually click on it when they see it on social media. So all those little practical things, if you know how to tell a story, there's all these other elements that you're learning at UTS that help you when you get to a workplace setting, you feel at home, you know what to do.
Thanks, Michaela. That's really appreciate it. We've got 3 questions, and I'm going to throw them at the panel. There's some that I can answer. So the first one is by Nikki. Does UTS journalism have any industry partnerships? Yes, we do. We have a very strong industry partnership with different various news organizations. But what's more important is that we have, as part of our team, Dr. Helen Vastakopoulos, who is the internship coordinator, and also Christine Kearney, who teaches them to the MA, who's the international partnerships coordinator. And they are working exclusively on providing internships and opportunities for students. So we actually have the inbox flooded on a weekly basis. I think our alumni can attest to that, in that we do have partnerships. And we are very well known at UTS for always having graduates who end up suited for industry and getting employed. So the industry partners are always happy to take our students. We've got another question here by Michael, I believe. Is doing this course part-time and working part-time manageable? Wendy? You spoke about going part-time?
I think there's so many different variables. I think the answer is yes. And also, you can always, if you start off doing 2 subjects one semester and that's too much, you cut back to 1 subject the next semester, and that's fine as well. It depends what else is going to be going on outside your life. You know, what other family commitments you might have, what other commitments to your community and your friendship group, or your hobbies or your interests and passions you might have. So, you know, as with anything, when you bring a major commitment into your life, whatever that is, for example, university, then there might be some things that you say, okay, for the next some, you know, for these next 12 weeks, I'm not going to do that. Or you take something out of your life to make it manageable. I think it's finding the balance so that it's enjoyable and useful rather than just an extra stress in your life is important. That'll be different for different people.
Thanks so much.
Short answer, yeah, get into it.
Just to the point.
Yeah. I think also if you're making this investment, you actually want to take the time to enjoy it and to do well. I think, you know, I had a little sister who the rhetoric was P's get degrees, but when you're doing your masters, you actually really want to see how much you can challenge yourself and see how well you can do. So I worked full-time and studied part-time, and it's absolutely doable. You just have to, you know that you love what you're doing and take it day by day.
Thanks, Elise. We started 5 past, so I think we can squeeze in one more question, which is the only question we have open at this stage. And this one is for you, Alex. So a question for Alex from Gina. Sports comms is very competitive industry now to get into. Does this course provide me with the opportunity to network? I am concerned that I will be older than the average 21-year-old intern applicant, so hoping this course will.
Yeah, so to that I would say I wouldn't. So I think one of the central factors of this is that networking opportunity. And, you know, example, last night we were talking to somebody who's on the executive of the International Cricket Council in Dubai, who runs their digital media arm, and, you know, his sign off was, here are my contacts, here are my social accounts, follow me, talk to me, ask me questions. And that's a really common refrain from the people in our subject. Honestly, some of my favorite students have been, I remember in my first semester, we had a student who was, if he wasn't 50, he was knocking on the door of it, and he was a geologist. And he called me one week and said, look, I'm really sorry, I have to miss this week's class. I'm like, no, it's fine. Like, you know, what's the reason? And he had to give a talk at a symposium in Peru that week in geology. But he loved sports journalism, and he still works in geology and loves it, and I think is really well regarded in that industry. I mean, they're flying him to South America to speak, so I figure he must be good at what he does. But he's writing for some sports journalism publications around the country, and, you know, and he's getting published quite frequently. And I follow him on Twitter now, and I don't know, man, like, that's just awesome. Like, here's a guy who his career had been going in one direction for decades. And it's not that he's lost that. He's just, you know, he's had a passion and he's followed it. And now he's able to, I guess, engage that passion, you know, without kind of completely going the full sea change from what he was doing. You know, I think that's great. So I definitely wouldn't worry about the age thing, because I think if Jason can crack it, then I'd say you're every chance. And in terms of the networking opportunities, I think it's genuinely one of the features of this subject. It's one of the best parts.
And seriously, if I can add to that, when you apply for internships, it's usually a written internship application. They don't know how old you are. Like, I'm 49. I got an internship this past summer with Sydney Morning Herald, you know. So the advantage of, I feel the same way in part. I was like, oh no, am I too old? I can't give the same sort of hours as, you know, some 19-year-old who goes home and has their washing and done for them and meals, you know, provided. I can't do that. But on the other hand, I have all this wealth of experience from a life lived and professional background that these other candidates don't have. So it's 6 to 1, half a dozen of the other, and I choose to focus on what I do have rather than what I don't. Yeah.
Beautifully said, and genuinely too. Thank you so much. There are no more questions in the Q&A, so I will wrap this just to be on time. 59 minutes we've been going. I want to very sincerely thank all the attendees for coming. I'm going to be, after I end, I'll put up a slide with contact information if you need any further information. but feel free to contact me, Saba Bibawi, Head of Discipline, or anyone else who you want from the team. All our details are online. I want to thank Alex from his very busy schedule for joining us today. It's great for students to know who they could potentially be working with. And a huge, big thank you to my students who have now become friends, Michaela, Wendy, and Elise, from different parts of Australia. Thank you so much for being there. Yes, so hopefully we get to see you and work with you and even travel with you at UTS Journalism. Thank you so much, and I'll just end up with the slide. Bye, everyone.